everything wrong with the Devil Wears Prada 2 happens in the first 10 minutes. And I'm going to show you exactly how, and more importantly, how I fix it. Hey guys, I'm Yang. I've been a screenwriter, a story consultant, and a script doctor for over 10 years. During this time, I've also been teaching at the Beijing Film Academy. And I've created this channel and this video to talk about movies, and not just like if I like them or not, whether they're good or bad, but talk about the structure, the characters, and the choices that make the story work or it doesn't work. And full disclosure, I personally really like the first Devil Wears Prada movie. It's one of my comfort movies I still put on from time to time when I'm feeling a bit down, when I feel like I need a little bit of lift. So I was really looking forward to the sequel. Now, I didn't have high expectations because, I mean, come on, it's been 20 years since the first one. So it felt kind of like a cash grab to me. But the fact that they were able to get all four of the big cast members back, I thought, even though, even if this movie turns out to be not as good as the first one, I think it should be still a pretty good time as long as they do the characters justice and provide a little bit of fan service, which, I would say they provided that, the fan service, but I think as a sequel, it's pretty much an absolute travesty. And yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today and how I would rewrite it. And so hopefully, after this video, you're going to get a insight into story structure and characterization. And if you just want to know more about storytelling in movies, or you want to level up your own writing, then this video will be for you. So without further ado, let's get into it. So at the end of the first movie 20 years ago, Andy leaves Miranda in Paris and goes back to becoming a journalist after she learns that Miranda, in order to save her own position at Runway, betrays Nigel, or goes back on, promising him a president's role in James Holtz's global brand. Okay. And Andy realizes that's not what she wants to do. She wants to go back to her roots as a journalist and goes back to her long-time boyfriend, Nate. That's the way the first movie ended. Fast forward 20 years, and Andy has become an award-winning investigative journalist. She wins this award, but at the same moment, pretty much, she learns that her newspaper is being shut down due to cut costs. And I think this is a part of the movie that does really well in that it, talks a lot about or integrates, the death of, legacy media, or the death of legacy print media. And it talked about the importance of preservation and stuff like that, which I personally agree with. So I think that's a pretty good inclusion there. And at the same time, Runway is facing a scandal of their own. They wrote an article endorsing a company that turns out to utilize sweatshops or something. So they are in a PR nightmare. So the owner of the parent company of Runway, Elias Clark, Irv, and his son decide that they need some damage control, right? So they're like, well, what are we going to do? Hey, let's hire this award-winning journalist that has a background in Runway. She can write the features department, and that'll give us some good press, and then she can write us some good spin. All right. So Andy accepts the job, and then she goes back to Runway to run the features department. She's very happy. Miranda is not. Okay, so that is pretty much the setup of the sequel. Now, some positives. So what I would say is that the best parts of the sequel are when the four of them are together on screen. So Miranda, Andy, Nigel, these three, their chemistry is still great. And then Emily, even though she's not at runway anymore, whenever she interacts with any of them, especially Andy, it's good chemistry, it's good cinema. So I really like that about this movie. It was super important to get all four of them together. It's I don't think it was the right decision to have Emily so distant from Runway. I understand why they did it, and I understand the story that they were trying to tell required it, but I don't think it was, the right decision because it really reduces the interaction between Emily and Andy, and that was really the highlight, or one of the highlights of the first movie. I think the movie could have started with Emily not at Runway, but probably should have found a way to include her in Runway with the plot. All right. So we'll come back to Emily and this whole like plot thing later on. But, overall, I think the four of them together is pretty great. Okay. So that's pretty much all the positives, I would say, that I could think of about this movie. So we're going to talk about the negative, and the most important negative is the characterization or the lack of characterization. Right. So what do I mean by this? We're going to take a look at this slide right here. This scene is Andy talking with her colleagues, right? These people, the four of them work at the Vanguard, which is the newspaper that was shut down. I think it's called the Vanguard, I'm pretty sure. And this scene happens right after she gets the call from Jay offering her the job at Runway. All right. So this scene right here is the debate scene in our structure, right? She's talking about whether she should go back to Runway or not. And I have highlighted the runtime here, which is 10 minutes, 30 seconds. So the inciting incident, which is she getting the job, happens earlier. Now, this is a problem because this is too short. You don't have enough time to characterize Andy properly in this short amount of time. Now, there's no hard and fast rule about how long your first act needs to be, but in my experience and my opinion, if your first act if it's not a cartoon, if it's not an animation, then it shouldn't be shorter than 16 minutes. Like if it's shorter than 16 minutes, you're really like not having enough time to do your characters properly. And the fact that this is less than 10 minutes, as soon as I saw this, I knew this movie was in trouble. And then all the problems we're going to talk about today stem from this lack of characterization. Okay. So why is she poorly characterized? The reason is I don't know why she takes the job at Runway. Now, you would assume that with her newspaper getting closed down, that it would be a motivation because she doesn't have a job. So she needs a job. So it comes from a need, right? So she gets fired, her newspaper gets closed and she gets laid off essentially, right? And then she needs a job. So this job comes and she needs to take it because she doesn't have a job. Okay. That on the surface would be all right, but it's actually not really her motivation because, not technically, but in reality, if she just won an award for investigative journalism, I'm sure she can get a job at any other publication that has a features department or has a investigative journalist department, right? They still exist. I mean, there's not just one newspaper that does it. She could have gotten a job anywhere in New York, essentially, with her, award, right? So the fact that she goes to Runway is kind of like a deliberate choice. That's the first thing. The second reason why I know that she doesn't need a job or doesn't need the money is because very soon afterwards, she purchases a luxury apartment. Okay. Now, the movie tries to justify this by saying that she purchases this apartment because she's getting paid 3 times as much at Runway. Now, the problem with this logic is anyone knows that buying an apartment like this in New York is crazy. In Manhattan, it's nuts. Okay. And there's a view of Central Park in this apartment. So, I'm not a real estate expert, but I think that would cost a lot of clams. Okay. That would cost a lot of smackaroons. All right. So even if she is getting paid 3 times as much in Runway, unless she's getting like a signing bonus or something, I just don't believe that she would have a savings. She would have enough savings to put a down payment to purchase an apartment like this, right? You still have to pay an amount of money up front. You just can't take out a mortgage, like 100% mortgage on this whole thing, right? I mean, I don't know. Like, it just doesn't seem like maybe you can. I don't know. The point is, it doesn't seem like she's strapped for cash. Okay. And that's a problem because that goes to the other problem of this movie having a conflated or multiple motivations. This is something that you never really want to do when you're like writing a story, right? To have multiple reasons to do something. One is always better than many. Okay. Like if you have one solid logical reason, that beats out having multiple like okay reasons. Okay, the other problem with this is that there's this motivation of her being offered to write a book, a expose on Miranda, right? This friend of hers, who used to work with her at the Vanguard or whatever, like she says, hey, you can take this job at Runway and then write an expose or write a biography on Miranda Priestley. And if you do that, my editor at this book company that I now work for, he or she would go crazy for this book and give you a lot of money. Now, in this scene, right, Andy rejects this outright. She's like, no, I could never do that to Miranda. I could never do that to her. It's immoral. I would do whatever, right? But then 45 minutes into the movie, she changes her mind and decides to, I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to do it. Again, why does she do it? Does she need the money? I don't know. I think she's like, oh, we'll give you like 300,000, like a down payment for this book. And he's like, no, I can't take it. So I mean, does she take it? I don't even know. But the point is, like in the beginning, because you have only 10 minutes in the first act and half of it is spent with like Miranda and Nigel dealing with the fallout from their bad PR thing in Runway. So you only really have like 5 minutes with Andy, right? So that's not enough characterization. Okay, that is just not enough time for me to know what Andy's motivation is. Does she need money? Okay. Has she always wanted to work at Runway? Again, does she miss her time there? It's been 20 years, but does she still think about it? Or has she always wanted to write a book on Miranda because she wants to be a writer now? Like she has done this journalism thing for 20 years and now she wants to write a book. That's her goal. She doesn't know what to do about this book. She doesn't know what to write about, except that she wants to write. The only thing that she's interested in is Miranda Priestley, right? So that would make sense, right? If we had this motivation. So she goes to Runway kind of like undercover to write this expose on Miranda. If that was her motivation, I think this movie would have been much better, right? Because then it would be clear why she takes this Runway job, what the stakes are, what her motive is, and then we can have a reversal where in the end, where Miranda always knew that Andy was going to write this book, and then or she can find out and then feel betrayed, and then Andy feels like guilty about betraying Miranda when Miranda helps her, during the like middle of the movie, right? Okay. So I personally would think that like just being a secret agent, going to Runway to write this expose book was probably the right call, but they were kind of really wishy-washy about this, didn't make it clear, added in this whole like losing her job type of thing, which again is not really necessary if you really think about it, right? The book motivation is good enough. Like Andy could win the award and then feel like she just wants to do something else. Like she should just win the award, feel empty afterwards. Everyone's like, why do you feel empty? And then she's like, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. I feel like I want to do something different. I want to write a book. And she's like, and they're like, what do you want to write about? I say, well, I've always wanted to write about my time at Runway, right? So like that's the proper way of doing it, right? That's the proper first act, right? But you can't do it in 10 minutes. You just can't do it. Okay. So that's the first thing. Now, she goes to runway, right? And then she runs the features department. And that leads us to the second thing where I want to talk about is the love relationship, is the romantic relationship, right? Okay. So in the first movie, she has this long-term boyfriend, Nate, here. And then in the second movie, Nate's not here, right? He's not talked about, so I just assumed we couldn't get this guy back, in this movie, and they just like wrote him out, right? So he just disappeared, and then she meets this new guy who is the developer for the luxury apartment that she purchases. All right, so this guy, why is he bad? The reason why he's bad is because he doesn't participate at all in the plot. He doesn't participate at all in Andy being at Runway, right? Now, why is this a problem? It's not a problem because Nate is not involved in Runway at all either. But the difference between Nate and Peter is that Nate represents Andy's moral compass, right? He represents the old Andy, the idealistic Andy who wants to be a journalist, right? So his relationship with Andy is a symbol of her, you can say, her descent into darkness and then her comeback, right? So when in the first movie, when Andy is losing herself in this fashion world, her relationship with Nate begins going downhill, right? And then they take a break. She sleeps with Christian Thompson. We'll get to him soon. And then in the end, when she realizes that this is not the life that she wants, she quits Runway and goes back with Nate, right? So his relationship with Andy represents Andy's thematic growth or thematic turn, right? So that's his purpose. There is no purpose with Peter. Like he's not involved with the plot, which is the Runway stuff, and he doesn't represent Andy's emotional or character change or thematic change. Why? Because Andy doesn't have a thematic change. Why? Because again, 10 minutes of characterization is not enough to establish a character flaw. It's not enough to establish a character's want or motivation or what she lacks in her life that she wants to fill with going to Runway. Okay. So she doesn't have any sort of emotional setup for this character to represent. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right. So what this guy is just a token love interest that doesn't really do anything for the story except to be there and have Andy talk about her problems too. Like that's his role, to listen to Andy complain about Miranda, complain about Runway, complain about modern day internet and what that has done to journalism, whatever. That's his job, right? So the fact that they break up in the middle and then they get back together in the end, it doesn't really do anything. There's no point to it. It's very different than Nate, right? Like I think that's very clear. Now, the other relationship that we can compare between the first one and the second one is Christian Thompson, who is this, I guess, hotshot writer person in New York, and then Peter, right? Now, Christian Thompson, like, I think is much better because he represents the opposite of Nate. Like, he represents the, fashion world, the charismatic, fashionable, guy who can help Andy in her career, and he does, right? Like he is the one who gives her the Harry Potter book in the first one to not impress Miranda, but to show Miranda up, to show that, hey, I can do my job really well. And he is directly involved in the plot of the first movie because in the end he was originally the one promised to be the editor, or I guess get a position at Runway. But then when Miranda screws over Nigel, she also indirectly screws over him. Yeah, so he's involved in the story quite a lot in the first movie, right? So as you can see, it's very different than Peter here. Okay. All right. So that's kind of like the love story, romantic side of things. What if I had to like change this, if I had to like, pick one, if I had to like do something about this love relationship, again, it's not even this guy's problem. It's not Peter's problem. I think he's a fine character, right? He doesn't need to be involved with the plot if he does what Nate did in the first movie and represent Andy's like core values. Like he really should, for example, like investigative journalism. Maybe he has even read some of her pieces before, and he's the one who tells her like, "Hey, I don't think Runway is really for you, or I don't think what you're doing right now is really what you want to be doing, etc." This all will work if there was more characterization in the first act, and if what she's doing at Runway is to actually write the expose. Right? Peter can find out about her writing this expose. Maybe they're hanging out at her place, and then he goes to the washroom and stumbles upon her writing this thing on Miranda. And then he's like, "Hey, oh, I just saw that you're writing this book on Miranda." And then Andy gets really defensive about it, and then Peter's like, I don't think that's a really proper thing to do. And he's like, "Oh, who are you to judge me?" Whatever, right? If that would make a lot of sense, that would make their breakup much more meaningful. And then, because it represents Andy's like descent into the negative theme or the antithesis, right? So, that's what I would do about it. But right now, he's just like this token love relationship romance person that I just think doesn't really, it's just really pointless, right? Much of the movie's plot. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the main issue about this movie, other than the first 10 minutes of characterization or the lack of characterization, and that revolves around this character called Sasha Barnes, played by Lucy Liu. So Sasha Barnes is this elusive philanthropist slash divorcee of Benji Barnes, who is this like tech billionaire, right? And after the divorce, Sasha has disappeared, or disappeared from the spotlight. So everyone wants to get an interview with her, including Miranda and Runway. I don't really know why they want to do that, but apparently she's like the albatross of this movie. And one of the ways that Andy gains Miranda's favor, or shows Miranda she's very capable, is that she is the one who gets an interview with Lucy Liu, or with Sasha Barnes, right? Now Sasha Barnes, this character plays a pivotal role in the ending of the movie. So what essentially happens is that Irv dies in the around like just before the midpoint of the movie right here. Irv, again, is the owner of Elias Clark, which is the parent company of Runway. Right? He dies before he can promote Miranda to the head of global content, which is a position that Miranda has coveted for a long time. Okay. So when he dies, his son Jay takes over here. And Jay has decided to downsize Runway, to gut it, if you will. So he has brought in a bunch of strategists and good people to help with this downsizing. All right. So that's kind of like the main plot of this story. Now, how Sasha Barnes plays into it, we have to first talk about how Emily plays into it. So in order to save a Runway and to save the features department, which is Andy's job, Andy reaches out to Emily because Emily is actually dating Benji Barnes. So Emily is dating Sasha Barnes' ex-husband, this tech billionaire. And then Andy convinces Emily to convince her husband or boyfriend to buy Runway and to keep it the way it is, to protect Miranda. Okay. But then around the middle, past the middle, we learn that Emily's real plan is to take over Runway herself. And then we have this whole thing about how, a few years ago or before, Emily was forced out of Runway by Miranda. Miranda forced Dior to hire her. I don't really know why. I think maybe because Emily was getting too powerful or like whatever, or too much like influence at Runway. So Miranda had to get rid of her. Okay, fine. So Emily's out for revenge. She wants to get her boyfriend to buy Runway so she can take it over. Okay. Now, what does this have to do with a Sasha Barnes, right? This has to do with Sasha Barnes because in the end, to thwart Emily's plan, Andy convinces Sasha Barnes to purchase not just Runway, but Elias Clark, the parent company, right? And then to like have Miranda just stay on as, Runway's editor-in-chief. The problem here is that I don't understand why she does this. Why does Sasha Barnes suddenly purchase Elias Clark? I don't think there's no evidence in the movie to suggest that she really likes Miranda or anyone in publication at all. Like everyone's been trying to get an interview with her, I assume, including Miranda herself. She has avoided her or ignored all these requests until Andy showed up at Runway and started writing the features department. And in this scene, Sasha Barnes says, I agreed to do this because I feel like you guys, Runway, has been writing articles with more gravitas lately. So she agreed to this interview because of Andy's features. Okay. So there's nothing here about Miranda. So why would she in the end spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to purchase a media conglomerate just to save a woman that she, save Miranda, who I don't believe that she really likes or, feels indifferent about, and a journalist who writes features that she likes? Is that enough motivation for someone to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to save? I don't think it is. But I mean, maybe that's just me, right? Again, this whole thing is ridiculous, right? Like if you think about it, this whole plot doesn't make any sense. It's not structured properly. And it's just, I just think it does such a big disservice to these characters, right? And it just makes the whole movie seem trivial and inconsequential, right? So that's pretty much the big problems with this movie. Now, how would I go about fixing it, right? Like, what is the rewrite here? Okay, the rewrite is setting up Andy's character, which we already talked about. But the other problem is now the ending. Now, to solve the ending, what we have to do is talk about the first movie, how it ended. So just a bit of a refresher here. For the first movie, basically what was going on was that Miranda was being forced out again from Runway, and she was going to be replaced by Jacqueline Foyer, who is the editor of French Runway, right? Her here. And obviously Miranda is not gonna have this. At the same time, there is this designer named James Holt, whose brand is going to become global. He has just gotten financing from this Italian fashion brand, I think. Massimo, I think is what his name is. And his brand is about to go global, and he needs a present, a partner. Now, originally, this person was going to be Nigel. Okay. Nigel, who has always been a loyal Miranda supporter at Runway, he is going to get his dream job of becoming the president of James Holt International. This is the job that Miranda put him up for, something he has been working towards his whole life. Okay, this was the setup. But Miranda, in order to save her own hide and to keep her position at Runway, she convinces James Holt to hire Jacqueline, right? So she can stay as the editor-in-chief of Runway, thus screwing over Nigel. And this scene right here, Nigel is very disappointed. He tells Andy that, Miranda will pay her back. She has not paid him back in 20 years, right? So this is the way the first movie ended. Now, why is this important? It's important because we have to see the structure of this ending and what we can do to call back to it and to innovate or to iterate on it, right? People will say, or I would say that one of the biggest problems with this ending in the second movie is that Andy doesn't really do anything in this movie to fix the end, right? So, how she convinces Sasha Barnes to buy Elias Clark is to make a lot of aggressive phone calls, right? She calls Sasha Barnes over and over again, harassing her and then convincing her to buy Elias Clark. That's how she solves the problem, which is not very climactic, right? You can argue that in the first movie, Andy didn't do anything either because, it turns out that she didn't know what Miranda was planning and Miranda just outmaneuvered everyone, including Andy, and then Andy was in the dark as well. So why does Andy need to do something different in this movie? Why can't it just be the first movie? Well, the first movie works because, like we said, even though Andy doesn't do anything, she's not like the one fixing the problem. She's the one that changes, right? She realizes that Nigel is this loyal person, right? And then in the end, he's the one that gets backstabbed, and she doesn't want to live in this world anymore. She doesn't want to become this person. She realizes that if she goes down this path, she's gonna maybe become like Miranda, and that's not what she wants to be. So she leaves, right? So even though the first movie's climax doesn't really have anything to do with Andy, but the change in character, the thematic change, happens in her, right? So for the sequel, what I would say the best way of doing it is to reverse it, is to have Andy be the one to be the mastermind and have the thematic change or the character change in Miranda, right? So how would we accomplish this? Okay, first things first, we need to go back to this scene here, the Sasha Barnes scene, and we need to set up that Sasha Barnes is considering her next move, and she feels her next move is that she wants to start her own publication for women, for philanthropy, spirituality, and fashion combined together, right? That's what she wants. Whereas currently in the movie, the way it is right now, what she wants is to get married. She's going to get married again. To whom? I don't know, right? The movie just says she's going to get married and we don't know who the person is, right? It's not important, right? So, so to fix the ending, we need to set up that Sasha Barnes wants to start her own publication for combining fashion, spirituality, and philanthropy. It could be anything, right? But she wants a seasoned hand to be her partner, hinting that she wants Miranda to do this with her. Miranda is intrigued by this offer, but she's like, I have runway. I obviously can't leave. So this is the setup. And then in the end, what needs to happen then is that Andy convinces Sasha Barnes to purchase Elias Clark and then convinces Miranda to start the publication with Sasha Barnes, at the same time handing the chief editor position to Nigel, right? Which is what she should have done years ago. This is what she owes him, and this is what he deserves, right? Because that's not only does it reverse the first movie's ending, it gives Miranda a thematic change, a character change, and it gives Nigel a happy ending, which is, I think, what we all want, right? Whereas currently, the way the movie is now, all Nigel gets is a token appreciation. Miranda suddenly, they're in Italy here, right? They're at this Italian fashion show or whatever, and then Miranda all of a sudden comes to the realization that she has taken Nigel for granted, and to show him her appreciation, she allows him to give the keynote speech at this fashion show, a keynote speech that he wrote for her, which, in my opinion, is not enough of a compensation for screwing him over 20 years ago and for him to be such a loyal companion slash employee slash partner for over 20 years. I don't think that's enough, right? And I felt very indignant about the way they treated Nigel. I felt he deserved to get Runway in the end. I felt he deserved to be the editor-in-chief of Runway, or the chief editor of Runway. Okay, like that's what he deserved, and it should have happened to help Miranda with her character change, right? So that is probably the best version of this ending that this movie could have gotten. And that's my opinion. I think, it makes the most sense with all the elements that are already in the story. And it's just, I feel like it was almost there. I felt like there were bits and pieces of what I just proposed in the story. It just didn't come together in the end. I don't know if it was because the script needed more time to cook, or if they just decided, it's a bit too convenient. I don't know. I don't know. Only the director or writer can tell you. Going off of this point, one last thing I want to point out is the ending of this movie. Now, I don't think there's going to be another sequel. I hope not. I don't know how well this movie did. I'm sure this movie did very well in terms of box office and stuff. I think people would just go watch it for the characters and stuff. So I'm sure it did well. Did it do well enough to warrant a third movie? I don't know. I hope not. Not that I hope it didn't do well, but I hope there isn't a third movie, because based on what I saw in this one, I just don't want to see these characters be butchered any more than they have been already. So what I really wanted from this sequel is to have like a happy ending for all the characters, right? Nigel, we already talked about, but also for Miranda. I really feel like she's such a flawed character in the first movie, and that's what made her great. But in the sequel, I feel like I feel more compassion for someone who has dedicated her life to a job, to this magazine that's kind of not relevant anymore in this internet age, right? I felt like I wanted to see her, it's like that Lord of the Rings scene where she's going with the elves on the boat to wherever, right? I think that's what I kind of wanted for her, like a send-off, right? And I feel like this movie was trying to do that, right? So this is really big callback scene in the end here, where she, goes back. So Miranda's still the chief, the editor of Runway, and Andy's still working at the features department. Okay, and then she goes to visit Miranda at her office, and then she's wearing this sweater vest type of thing. And when I saw this, I got very excited, because I was like, oh my God, they're going to call back to the most important scene in the first movie. This scene in the first movie, in my opinion, is the best scene in the first movie, and one of the best scenes, in my opinion, in modern cinema. When I say modern, I mean since the 2000s. Okay. This scene is so good. I'm just going to give everyone a little recap here. This scene is when Andy, it's all really smug and laughs at this woman holding up two belts, and she's thinking that they're both the same. And then Miranda claps back and says, and just educates Andy on how, even though she thinks she's above fashion, how she lives her life in fashion. And she goes on about how this sweater is not really blue, it's cerulean, and how this color was picked by people in this room years ago, right? And that scene was so cool, because not only did it show Miranda's character, it also took Andy down a peg, and that was a big moment for her, because since after that moment is when she starts to change, when she starts to take this job and fashion seriously. And for me personally, when I saw that scene, I became personally interested in how fashion worked, and I did some research and I learned a lot. And I think that scene is is what movies can do. It can entertain and educate at the same time, right? And do it in a very emotionally satisfying way. I think that's like the power of cinema, and that scene represents that for me. So to have a call back here, I was very excited, but they didn't do it. She goes to see Miranda. There's no mention of the sweater, no mention of cerulean. No, there wasn't even like a look. There wasn't even like this double take look from Miranda to the sweater. Now, I was so disappointed with this lack of callback that I went online and did some research, and it turns out that she wearing the sweater is on purpose. The costume designer slash director and the director, or I mean, either were, I kind of forget. They came out and said that they did this on purpose, that this sweater was indeed a callback to the sweater in the first movie, but they wanted to make it subtle. They didn't want to make this callback like a big like thing. Now, I think subtlety is great, but I think since this is this final scene of the movie for a franchise, not a franchise, but like for like a story that's coming to an end, I don't think subtlety was the right play here. I think this could have been so good as a way to give Miranda and Andy proper send off, right? So like, how would I have done this scene, right? I mean, I obviously don't want to do something so crass as to have Miranda, look at the sweater and be like, hey, nice sweater. Like, that's stupid, right? We don't want to do that. But we don't want to be lowbrow and basic. Right. So what I would want to do in this final scene is to have Miranda look at this sweater and then in her like snarky, condescending way, be like, that blue is a very interesting, brave choice that you've made. Something like that. Like on the surface, it seems like an insult, right? But Annie should just smile like she does in this scene, right? Because she knows what Miranda's doing. This is kind of like the way they bond. This is like their relationship. Like on the surface, yeah, it seems like she's like insulting her, but she's really not. Right? Because Miranda's calling back to the first movie, calling back to, something that made the relationship what it is today. And Miranda should, insult her sweater, right, on the surface. And then Andy should smile and say, actually, I think it's cerulean. Like, that's it. And then Miranda can scoff or, inhale or exhale or whatever. And then that'd be it. And then Andy would leave. And then better yet, Miranda can, and then Andy says, is there anything you need? And Miranda said, no, that's all, right? If you want to give some more fan service, that would be great. But they don't do it, which is fine, right? But that ending with Miranda's calling her sweater blue and then Andy saying it's cerulean, that goes full circle. Right? We can get that, right? We goes full circle. In the first movie, Andy gets educated on how the sweater is not blue, is cerulean, and why that's important. And in this movie, Andy is the one that calls back the cerulean, which symbolizes to the audience that she has now gone full circle. She left the fashion world, has come back and has decided to stay and has found herself in this world and is at peace. And it also shows that Miranda, this simple gesture shows that she has learned or has accepted that, hey, maybe I should stop tearing people down all the time and build people up, which is what I think is the right character arc for her. I understand some people be like, oh, well, I like Miranda because she never changes. I get it, right? I get that sentiment. I get that thinking, but I think just for the last time that we're going to see Miranda Priestley, I really want to feel like, she's going to be all right, that she's going to go on and, live out her days in peace and productivity, right? And I think what really needed to happen was to show Miranda like just a little bit of change, right? Her softening just a little bit, right? Recognizing Andy's growth and building people up instead of tearing them down, right? I think that would have been so good for the both of them, to use the sweater as a symbol for both their growths. So I was really disappointed with the way they handled the sweater. I know in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not a big deal, but I just felt like it was such a big missed opportunity, and and I don't know. I was really disappointed. Okay. All right. So we're gonna do a little summary here for the end. So the ending basically is flip the original. Andy runs the climax, and then Miranda's the one who changes. We want to set up Sasha by having her want her own publication that wants Miranda. And then Andy's move in the end is to have Sasha buy Elias Clark. And then Miranda leaves Runway to build it with Sasha. Runway goes to Nigel, which makes up for the betrayal 20 years ago, which I think really needed to happen. I just really feel bad for Nigel, man. He's one of my favorite characters, right? Like, I just feel like they did him dirty. They did him bad. And then Miranda's arc could be more about letting go and building someone up, right? This is what I think needed to happen. Again, all of these things don't work without the first 10 minutes of without proper characterization, which this movie doesn't have. So I would say lessons for writers is don't rush act one. I would say there's not, again, no hard and fast rule, but if it's a live action movie, I just really think 16 minutes is the minimum, right? And if you have a weak ending, a weak middle, is usually because of your first act, right? Like, I mean, in my teaching / script doctoring story editing days, most of the problems, I would say 95% of the problems is in the first act, right? Like, people come to me and be like, oh, I feel like our third act is flat, it's stupid, it's dumb, let's fix it. I was like, and the problem is usually never in the third act. It's usually always in the first act, right? So if you write your story or your outline and then you feel like your ending's not hitting, is usually because of the first act. Most important thing is you have to nail your characters first. Everything else comes from your characters. I'm not saying characters are more important than plot. It's not. Plot is the most important thing. It's your concept. But once you have your concept, once you know what the general plot is, you have to make sure the character serves the plot. You have to make sure the characters are set up properly to do so. Yeah, so that's again, 16 minutes. You don't want anything less than that. Obviously there are movies that characterize a person properly less than 16 minutes. I'm not going to say no movies do it, but I just think for new writers, beginner writers, where people or writers who aren't sure of who want kind of like a guideline, I would say 16 minutes is a good guideline. All right, guys. So that is my rewrite, review, analysis of The Devil Wears Prada 2. What did you think? Did you like it? Did you learn something? Let me know. Comments below. Like, subscribe if you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one.